So welcome back to another episode of the BioHub. Today, we're thrilled to welcome on Sheila Gujrathi, a visionary physician, biotech entrepreneur, and advocate for diversity in life sciences. Sheila's co-founded and led multiple biotech companies, guided groundbreaking therapies in immunology, oncology, and inflammation, and played a pivotal role in major acquisitions worth billions. And Sheila's impact goes far beyond the lab and boardroom. She's a passionate advocate for women and underrepresented minorities in biotech, and co-founding initiatives like the Biotech CEO Sisterhood and the South Asian Biopharma Alliance. She's also an author, sharing her insights to inspire the next generation of leaders. So join us today as we'll discuss Sheila's new book, The Mirror Effect, the Biotech CEO Sisterhood, and leadership. So Sheila, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
Great. So great to be here.
Yeah, look, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. So let's just start off with your book that you released recently, The Mirror Effect. Congratulations on that. Could you just give us a brief overview of the meaning behind the title of the book, and what inspired you to write the book now?
Yes, it's been such a journey, and I would say a labor of love. I am so blessed to have a wonderful career in the biotech and pharma space. I am a clinician by background, and I love really thinking about patients, and have them really at the core of whatever I'm doing. But I feel very fortunate that I found this career in biotech, drug development, and actually then starting companies and founding them and growing them to develop hopefully life-changing and very meaningful therapies for patients. So I embarked upon this journey, but I had a lot of lessons learned along the way. So I often found myself the one and only woman of color in review committees and boardrooms. And as I was advancing into higher levels of corporate leadership, and then at the C level, both as a chief medical officer and then a co-founder and a chief executive officer or a board director or chairwoman, I often found again that I was really sometimes the only person in the room who looked like me, spoke like me, thought like me. So like with that diversity of opinion. But it did get more and more difficult, I think, as I got into these higher levels of leadership. And I realized there's really no playbook or manual, but especially from people who have different backgrounds, maybe underrepresented groups, minority groups, or even anyone who thinks differently or feels like they don't fit in or belong, it can be incredibly lonely. And we don't necessarily have the same support networks and learnings or like just maybe infrastructure to learn as some of our other allies and peers. So what I saw basically coming out of the COVID pandemic, I decided, it was time. It was time to actually pay it back, pay it forward, and say, can I do more here to help advocate for my peers who felt like me, surround ourselves and build a bit bigger network and community, and also help set up the next generations for better success than we, or at least better set them up for success than we had been. We are trailblazers. We're going out and we're sometimes breaking that glass ceiling, both externally and internally. But I thought there just got to be a better way to do this. I'm really a big believer in not recreating the wheel. I was a McKinsey consultant also. We always said, don't boil the ocean. Like I love being practical. And I thought if I could, really bring all my lessons learned from my successes as well as my failures into one book and really and it just became this like labor of love. It was from this very deep place inside of me. It also coincided with the timing of when I started to build this organization that's now known as the Biotech CEO Sisterhood, with two amazing co-founders, Andrew and Julia Owens. And then that all led up to a TEDx talk I did last year, where I talked about shattering the glass ceiling by finding the right mirrors. And I put all that into this book, and that's where the mirror effect came from. And the mirror effect has been, again, this journey for me to really understand how important it is to have mirrors in our lives. Mirrors are external in terms of the folks who see us, hear us, truly believe in us, reflect our brilliance, have our back, and support us and champion us to go into those higher levels of leadership. But it's also the mirror effect is internal, where we hold up our own mirror and face our inner glass ceiling and our limiting thought patterns and beliefs to really step into our power. and be a really thriving leader. So that's, kind of the encapsulation of what the mirror effect as a title has come to represent for me. But it's been, again, this journey with lots of different lessons learned, both personally and professionally, that have really come into this book.
Nice. And it looks like there's been an awesome reaction to the book as well. I think I've seen a lot of people on LinkedIn. It's resonated with a lot of people quite closely as well. So it looks like the reaction to the book's been super positive all round.
I'm so thrilled that has been the early response. It's been really overwhelming for me. I wrote also a journal, as you can see, that I have a workbook journal as well as my book. And because I just wanted to make this as practical and helpful as possible. So while the book itself, talks about different lessons learned and it has summary sections for each chapter, I then want to take it one step further with journaling prompts and exercises per chapter that people can do in peer groups to really make this come alive. The book officially launches on November 4th, but I've already been out doing a number of book launch events, and I've just gotten feedback. I was at dinner last night with some colleagues and friends who literally, one of the women shared that she just started crying when she was reading the book because it spoke to her so deeply. And again, just so people don't feel alone also along this journey, that they know I have their back and it's not them. They're not alone. And, we can do this together.
Nice. I love that. And just looking back through your career, you've obviously led major companies and guided successful exits previously in the past as well. What were some of the lessons learned about inclusive leadership that perhaps maybe only came after some of the successes that you had?
One of the biggest lessons learned was basically that I could do that. I was in large biotech and large pharma, Genentech and BMS, and then I decided to go into the small emerging biotech space in my first role as a chief medical officer. I think I surprised myself about how well I could operate as an executive and a leader, how I could be the external face of a company, how I could, really drive a very innovative and accelerated development program and communicate well with investors. And I think I was an example of inclusive leadership. And prior, in different roles I had in my career, I often was told that I wasn't the right fit for an executive role and that I wouldn't be an appropriate external spokesperson. And I actually started to internalize that, okay, well, that's not for me. I can play these roles, but I won't be the one out in front. I won't be the one leading. And then I think, my own personal story and those of countless women and other leaders that come from different backgrounds really goes against that grain. And we're examples of how successful inclusive leadership can be for companies. Um, and I think, so I think that was a huge set of lessons learned. And then, of course, I have embraced that in the companies I have built. For the companies that I have led and that I'm currently leading, I don't even look at, like the backgrounds. I mean, it just naturally becomes very inclusive. Like, there's a lot of diversity at the board level, the C-suite, and then in the company itself, we're typically 50% or more women, again, different backgrounds. And I think it's just because that's the diversity of perspective and I'm looking for the best talent, and that naturally just occurs. So I do think diversity and inclusiveness really drives performance and leads to better cultures, because we basically have to take time to understand each other's perspectives more, because we are coming together with a lot of different diverse perspectives, which only leads to better outcomes for our drugs and our companies.
Nice. And just toxic workplaces, I think, can be hard to name, let alone leave. What do you think are some of the signs that you're in the wrong ecosystem? And what first steps should someone take to move forward if they're in that toxic environment?
Yeah, I really wanted to spend some time talking about this. My book has a 3-part framework, in terms of like that roadmap or manual to really raise our levels of leadership and really raise our levels of confidence as well. The first part is holding up your own mirror and knowing thyself. So we always start and end with ourselves, really. So I think that I spent a lot of time on that. But the whole second section of the book is about understanding your environment, reflecting on your surroundings. And I spent time on this because I actually didn't realize that I was in some very challenging work environments until after the fact. Sometimes you don't know what difficult or challenging is until you know what good looks like. I often make the analogy of being in a good relationship. Once you're in a good relationship, you're like, oh, I'll never go back to not being treated well. It's kind of an eye-opening experience for many of us. I think that's true also of work environments. When we're in a thriving, supportive, safe work environment and we know what that looks like, what that feels like for us, we're like, oh, I never want to settle for less. This is the type of work environment I want to work in. This is the type of manager I want to have. This is the type of peers and culture I want to work in. And so I think that is really, it's so interesting to me, and it was, again, illuminating. So my biggest advice is for those to follow the signs. Often it'll be in our body. Our body and mind will be telling us that there's something not quite right. Sometimes it's a sinking feeling in our gut. Sometimes the hair on the back of our neck stands up, or we just have this feel of unease. We've gotten so comfortable being uncomfortable in certain situations, but I would say don't ignore those signs anymore. If you think there are red flags or warning signs that you're experiencing in your body or that are coming up in your mind of, wow, that really wasn't appropriate what that person said to me or to some other person in your environment, please pay attention to that. Or if you feel like you're not able to really be your true self, I often say, you should be your whole self at work and at home. You should be an integrated person. You shouldn't have to like check your personal you at home and then step into your work you. Like that isn't sustainable, and that's not how you're going to thrive, because I truly believe that power and leadership comes from an authentic place in ourselves. So first of all, just really, really raise your awareness and pay attention to those signs. In the book itself, I use a 3-part framework to guide people to try to help them navigate some of those difficult environments. It's called the 3 A's: assess, ally, and act. So first you want to assess, get real clarity, and you want to be objective about your assessment. And that's when you can be centered. When you're centered, then you can really be objective in assessing your environment. So that's why part 1 is so important. But really, get clear, document incidents, ask your trusted peers if they're observing similar behaviors, and then separate kind of the objective facts from your emotional reactions, because oftentimes we do get triggered, we are reactive. So really, I think getting that objective assessment from peers as well is really helpful. Secondly, allies. So, understand who your allies are in the company, who, again, that personal board of directors, your network, whether they're mentors or sponsors, people, your managers, people who you can talk to again, validate what you're experiencing and feeling, and are they having a similar shared experience? Oftentimes HR, there are people in HR you can speak to in a safe environment. Sometimes people share with me they don't feel safe going to HR because they're afraid that there could be repercussions for them when they go to HR, and that's so that they don't, again, feel safe to do that. So obviously whatever you feel safe doing in terms of getting that assessment is really important, and putting all that together to decide when you want to act. Another thing I really want to say to people is that you have options. You always have choice. Sometimes it may not feel like that, and sometimes in this difficult financial environment, people are concerned about keeping their jobs. A lot of people have come up to me and say, "Well, I really need this salary. I really need this paycheck. I don't feel free to leave," and that's okay too. I really want to honor people's personal situations. However, having said that, there is no reason to be treated badly, and there's no reason to work in an environment that is not serving you and really aligned with your values. And that can be very damaging. One thing I say about difficult work environments is that it's okay to work in them as long as it doesn't affect your sense of self. If it starts to corrode your sense of self, that can be incredibly damaging. So just pay attention to that as well. But decide if and when you want to take action. You can also be the change you want to see internally, role model good behavior and what that looks like and the type of culture you want to work in. Talk about that with your manager and leaders in the organization. And then also decide maybe when it's time to leave. I recommend trying to do that from a place when you already have a position, because I think that's a good position of strength to be. It's always easier to find a job when you have a job. But again, don't be afraid to take action to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And I think another one of the ideas that you challenge as well is striving for a seat at the table and being an advocate for building your own. What do you think that looks like in actual practice?
Yes. Well, first of all, we need to stop exhausting ourselves to earn a seat at someone else's table. That's like just fundamentally, something that I have learned through many years and decades. Because sometimes, you just can't even convince those who aren't seeing your brilliance, aren't seeing your potential. So, what this truly means for me in practice is find your people. Understand who sees you, who understands your talents and capabilities, and who are setting up environments and cultures that align with your values. So, for me in particular, my value set is are humility, collaboration, respect, excellence. And so, when I find people who also share those values, I know it and I want to network with them. So, start now in building that network for yourselves, building that personal board, finding your people, and trying to cultivate opportunities with that group of individuals. It looks different at every stage, but in early careers, build those peer groups and your community. And then when you get to higher levels of leadership, you get to create that culture and propagate that and amplify that. As an entrepreneur, you get to build the tables from scratch and decide who you want to be at your board, what investors you want to work with, who are the type of employees you want to bring into your company. So that looks different at different stages, but the most important thing is to do it.
So, as a woman of color leading in medicine, biotech, and venture capital, can you just share some of like the toughest leadership moments that you faced throughout your career?
Yeah, I think some of the toughest leadership moments were, I guess, I didn't realize at the time, but there were definitely some moments of whether you call them microaggressions or gaslighting. I share some of this in the book. Sometimes I was shocked by the way people spoke to me. And looking back, I'm not surprised in that was the reality I faced. And I try to have compassion for myself that I had actually those experiences. So when people said, "Well, who do you think you are to say this? You never listened. If I knew, you were going to be involved, I wouldn't have even joined." Again, just shocking things. And at the time, I should have said, "Well, thank you very much. I expect your resignation letter in the morning." Something to that effect. But I didn't. I kind of started doubting myself and said, "Oh, wow, what am I doing that's incorrect?" I didn't really stand up for myself. And many other women and people of color have shared experiences with me where they either experienced that directly or have overheard that type of language being directed as to other people. And again, it's just something that I've experienced through the last 3 decades. I do continue to hope that that gets better. I am a little bit concerned about our current environment in terms of kind of those bad behaviors and again, things that seem to be acceptable. From my perspective, there's never any reason or, any reason to tolerate bad behavior in our industry. We're here to help patients. We're working very hard in challenging environments in an industry which is not for the faint of heart. We put 150% of our heart, our intellect, our hard work into developing really meaningful therapies for patients. We need to treat our employees well. And again, there's no real excuse for bad behavior. When I started stepping into leaderships, roles where I was running big groups, or big teams, it was really easy for me to take care and stand up for my team. So then I started having a lot of courage and managerial and leadership courage to say, "Look, I will not tolerate anyone speaking badly to my employees or to members of my team. I don't want to have environments that are based on fear or that are not safe, because I really think that shuts people down and doesn't allow them to be creative and innovative and doesn't reward them for all their hard work and effort." But I often found that it was difficult to stand up for myself.
Yeah. Um, And just onto the biotech CEO sisterhood, which you'd co-founded, as you mentioned, with Julia and Angie. I think the way that that space has grown over the past few years is just amazing. I was fortunate to be at JPM when I saw all of the pink everyone was wearing. Why was that space so essential for setting up, and what advice do you have for women seeking their own sisterhoods in other fields? I've seen that you guys have now done biotech's CFO sisterhood, biotech CHRO sisterhood, so a really growing community. What advice would you have for women seeking their own sisterhood in other fields?
Yeah, the first amazing insight was just how powerful the networking community is for helping, for number one, transform the way we view ourselves. And that's the transformative power of the mirror effect. When you walk into rooms where you just feel like you belong, you're not questioning, your place in that room, it feels like coming home. And you really truly feel safe and comfortable. And then that can become your new normal, because you're like, oh, this is how it feels to not have to prove and strive and fight and struggle. And where you can just be. So if I could bottle up that feeling and put it into a pill and take it every day, I would. And I would give it to everyone I know, men and women, because it's so empowering to feel safe. So I just really want to amplify that it's very important to find these communities, because it helps you internally, ingest that, imbibe it, sink in it, and reprogram, your thought patterns and beliefs, so that you break through these inner glass ceilings and you confront what I call the FIDs: fear, insecurity, doubt, and shame. Let's get rid of the FIDs. Let's really truly step into our power. So that's so important in terms of really, again, finding your mirrors, finding those environments. Of course, we have the CO sisterhood and the CXO sisterhoods, but I advocate for everyone to build your communities, whatever that looks like: sisterhoods, brohoods, bring them together. I have a South Asian group as well that I love and want to do a lot of advocacy work for. And you can just do that today. You can start small, start with finding your peers, your friends, 3 to 5 people to bring into your network and grow from there, and do it with intentionality. I think one of the distinguishing factors that I've often been told about from members of the sisterhood, they said that, maybe we set up a different culture, because from day one, we wanted it to be a very psychologically safe space. And then we cultivated that culture and environment and made sure that we were bringing people into the network who truly wanted to support other women. We really believed in lifting each other up while we're climbing. And we wanted to find women and leaders who wanted to be supportive, and all of us would win along the way, and who kind of had an abundance mindset and not a very competitive mindset. So just be very intentional about what you're trying to create, and bring people into that networking community who share those intentions and who really want to collaborate. And we're very free in terms of sharing advice with one another. We share resources. We do lessons learned routinely. We talk about how to finance in this difficult environment, which investors and bankers to work with, because they were super supportive for us. We share talent, benchmarks. We're so free and giving in what we're doing. We're contributing, and we're givers, not grabbers or takers.
Yeah, and I can only assume, if you're like a young person early in your career, and you see this network that you've built, it's only encouraging for particularly females, that knowing that there is that community and support network. So it must be particularly encouraging for younger people as well as everyone.
It's true. It's something I learned so late in my career, and that's why I want people to learn earlier in their career. I've been doing a lot of events with even graduate students who are coming into their first professional job, or they've had a professional job and said, "Oh my goodness, in the corporate world." We like to sisterhood is a verb, not a noun. Actively showing up with other people. Again, that's just powerful. It's amazing what you can get done together.
Yeah, for sure. But I look forward to seeing all of the pink again at JPM.
Yes, Tuesday, JP Morgan, 4 p.m. Union Square. Be there, everyone.
Yeah,
Show up in pink, men and women. Yes, show up in pink, and we're going to celebrate just all of our greatness, our brilliance, and how much we're doing together in our industry.
For sure. How do you recommend professionals that start cultivating the kind of ecosystem with mentors, advocates, allies that supports long-term success?
Yes, I talk about this in the book. Again, the importance of building a network, a community. I reference it as a personal board of directors. That's something that an executive coach taught me when I was a Genentech. I was really great. I was really fortunate to have a few executive coaches in the early stages of my career, which did help me understand the importance of finding this group of supporters. I break it down in the book, just again to give a framework. Different people you want to surround yourself with. I talk about having supporters. These are your cheerleaders. It's just really important to have people who, again, see how great you are. These can be family members, friends, loved ones, children. Just people who, again, you just need some cheerleaders in your squad. On your board and in your network. You need role models, people who inspire you to say, oh, I want to be like that person, because you love how much they care about patients, or how scientifically rigorous they are, or what a great business leader they are. You want to have inspiring role models to just inspire and aspire to. You want mentors, people who you can ask advice to. And importantly and distinctively, you want sponsors. Sponsors are people who are going to really put your name in that hat, and throw your name in that ring for an opportunity. Call you up about, hey, let me network you with this person. They are a mover and shaker, and you want to know them. You want to have sponsors. Sponsors are different from mentors. Mentors are people who give you a lot of advice. They may or may not be a sponsor. Sponsors are people who are going to lift you up, who are going to promote you, who are going to put, again, recommend you for roles. That's you want a lot of sponsors in your network. And then you also want subject matter experts. You want people who are, maybe complement your skill set. For me, I grew up with a lot of scientific and clinical background. I spent time at McKinsey, so I had a business background as well. I do not have a great legal background. I do not understand legalese. So I have some great lawyers in my network that I can call and say, hey, can you help me understand this contract? Or can you advise me on things I should be watching out for as I step into a company or into a certain situation? So it's good to just surround yourself. And I'm often a subject matter expert for other leaders who maybe don't have a scientific and clinical background, to say, hey, is this a good target? Is this a good disease area? What are your thoughts? And then you want to have peers. Peers are so important to include on your personal board and network as well. So that's a framework. But I say start early, start often, start this week. Just go out there, network, and you're going to kiss a lot of frogs along the way. You're going to ask people to be mentors and sponsors for you. They may be too busy. That's okay. I often have people come to me asking for me to be in their network, and I obviously have limited bandwidth, but I'm here rooting for people. But just put yourself out there, ask people for help, network, and then you'll see people do want to help. If they say, hey, great presentation, I was really impressed by what you did, or how you launched that drug, or the financing you did, follow up with them and say, wonderful, would you like to have lunch? Would you like to have dinner? And really cultivate and build that relationship over time.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen that a lot on LinkedIn. You really push mentorship and surrounding yourself with mentors from early on in your career, and just having that circle you can fall back on.
Yeah, I think one big lesson learned throughout my career is you don't have to do it alone. I actually thought you did for a long time, and I thought I had to do it alone. And now I know I was really suffering silently, and I want everyone to know that we're human. We're not meant to do this alone, especially the things we're trying to do in our industry. And when we get into small startups, and for entrepreneurs and founders, the resilience we need to have is so high and so demanding. So we do need to have people in our network who are supporting us along our journey.
Nice. And just onto negotiation, I think it's often a tough hurdle, particularly for women and underrepresented professionals. What are some of the strategies that have worked for you throughout your career?
I like to say you're negotiating all the time, whether you know it or not. So it is important to say, what is my negotiation style? What types of strategies and tactics do I want to have? What are my principles of negotiating? I think it's important to find ways to negotiate without compromising your integrity, where you feel comfortable. For me, I do always care about what other people think, and I want to treat them respectfully. So, but that doesn't mean that I can't be a really strong and effective negotiator. Also, sometimes people say, "Well, you're just being too demanding as a negotiator." But I feel like I'm doing the same thing that a man would do in my similar situation. So, you have to kind of again have confidence in what you're doing. As long as I'm treating people respectfully, and I feel like I'm doing what any other strong, powerful leader would do in that situation, I'm going to stay and rest in that space. Some of the strategies that I recommend is really doing your homework, knowing your audience, knowing what's important to them, and who's on the other side of the table. For you, it's obviously we know what's important to us, but really know what's important for them, what's going to make a difference for them. Also, you need to know the benchmarks, like what's happening externally to you. If you're negotiating a salary, what are those compensation benchmarks? Research that market. So go in well informed, and because once you do and say, well, actually, this is market, in terms of these are the rates or the salaries or the compensation metrics that I'm talking about. That's really important. You want to back it up with data. Know where your hard lines are, where you're willing to compromise, where you're not. I think that's really important. And basically, just try to find those win-wins. Don't accept the first offer. Start high, and then figure out what you're willing to live with.
Nice. And just a question to round us off. If you could go back and speak to your younger self, what would you go back and say?
Well, I'd love to quote Maya Angelou. She's the first quote I have in the book, where she says, "You alone are enough." I didn't believe that for a long time. Was always trying to prove myself, people please, get external validation. But now I know that it is true, and I want everyone to feel that in their body, in their bones, that I alone am enough. And I really hope people say that to themselves. I alone am enough. You are already worthy. You don't have to do anything to prove that you belong. I think that's something that, again, women and minorities really struggle with. Immigrants struggle with this as well, always trying to fit in. There's nothing that we have to do to prove that we belong. And our difference is our power, not our liability. So really sit in that truth. And then from there, do your best work.
Nice.
And have fun along the way. I think I wish I had more fun. Now knowing how, it's easy to say now, looking back at my career, but if I could have told my younger self to just enjoy the journey, take more trips, have more fun, that would have been a wonderful thing to experience.
Nice. I love that. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on and helping us out with this. I think, I'm looking forward to the official book launch, which I'm sure will be a massive success. And obviously the biotech CEO sisterhood that you're building, again, incredible. And I think the book and this podcast will certainly resonate with a lot of people. So thank you again for helping us out with this. It was a pleasure.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.